Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Shadow Man Stories. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now, let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story.
My name is Jackson Steelwater, and I've been a park ranger for 12 years. People say I have a gift for finding lost hikers and predicting when mountains are about to kill someone. Maybe that's true. What I know for sure is that mountains don't forgive mistakes, and neither do the things that live on them. It was March 1985 when everything went wrong. I was leading a team up to the avalanche research station in the Chugach Mountains, about 90 miles from Anchorage. The station sits at 8,000 feet, where the wind never stops, and the snow can bury you in seconds if you're not careful. My team was small but solid. Dr. Lisa Stone, a scientist who studied avalanches like other people study books. Mike Torres, our equipment guy who could fix anything with duct tape and determination. Rachel Park, who read weather patterns better than most people read newspapers. And David Cross, a photographer who wanted to capture the raw beauty of Alaska's wilderness for some Nature magazine. I'd worked with Lisa before. She was tough, smart, and didn't panic when things got ugly. Mike and Rachel were new to me, but they came with good recommendations. David was the wild card, city boy from Seattle who thought Alaska was just like a postcard. The helicopter dropped us off on a Tuesday morning. The pilot, old Pete Kowalski, shook his head as we unloaded our gear. "Weather's turning nasty," he said, squinting at the gray clouds rolling in from the west. "I might not be able to get back up here for a week, maybe two." "We'll be fine," I told him. "Station's got enough supplies for a month." Pete didn't look convinced, but he lifted off anyway, leaving us alone with the wind and the mountain. The research station was a simple building. Thick walls, small windows, built to survive anything nature could throw at it. But when we walked up to the door, something felt wrong. The heavy wooden door hung open, banging against the frame in the wind. "That's not right," Mike said, dropping his pack. "Door like that doesn't just come open." I pulled out my flashlight and stepped inside. The place was trashed. Tables overturned, papers scattered everywhere, equipment smashed. But here's what bothered me most. There was no snow inside. If the door had been open all winter, the place should have been buried. "Looks like someone left in a hurry," Lisa said, picking up scattered research papers. David was already taking pictures, his camera clicking away. "This is perfect. Real wilderness mystery stuff." I wanted to punch him. This wasn't some adventure story. This was wrong. All wrong. We spent the afternoon cleaning up and setting up our equipment. The previous research team had vanished 3 months ago. Official reports said they'd probably gotten caught in an avalanche, but no bodies were ever found. Now, looking at the destruction, I wondered if something else had happened. As the sun set behind the peaks, the temperature dropped fast. We gathered in the main room around the wood stove, eating canned soup and trying not to think about the empty bunks where the last team should have been sleeping. "Listen," Rachel said suddenly. We all stopped talking. Outside, something was howling, but it wasn't like any wolf I'd ever heard. It was deeper, more intentional. Like it was trying to tell us something. "Wolves don't usually come this high," I said. "Maybe they're hungry," Mike suggested. Long winter. The howling came again, closer this time. And then something that made my blood freeze. Another howl answered from the opposite direction. Then another, and another. We were surrounded. David grabbed his camera and headed for the door. "I have to get this." I caught his arm. "No, you stay inside." "But, you stay inside," I repeated, harder this time. The howling continued all night, moving around the station in patterns that were too organized, too planned. Wolves hunt in packs, but they don't coordinate like military units. I didn't sleep. I sat by the window with my rifle, watching the darkness, and listening to sounds that made me think of my grandfather's stories about the old days, when things lived in these mountains that weren't quite animal and weren't quite human. Something was out there, something smart, something patient, something that had been waiting for us. I woke the team before dawn. Nobody had slept well. The howling had stopped around 3 in the morning, but the silence was worse than the noise. "We need to check the perimeter," I told them. "Look for tracks, see what we're dealing with. Probably just wolves. David said, but he didn't sound convinced anymore. Outside, the snow was crisp and clean. Perfect for tracking. What we found made no sense. The tracks were huge, bigger than any wolf I'd seen. But they weren't just big, they were wrong. Sometimes they looked like wolf prints, 4 paws in the snow. But other times, they looked almost human, 2 feet, like something walking upright. These can't be from the same animal, Lisa said, kneeling beside one of the clearest prints. Mike measured them with a ruler from his toolkit. 18 inches long. What kind of wolf has 18-inch paws? I didn't answer. I was looking at something else. The tracks circled our station exactly 7 times, always staying the same distance from the building. Like they were marking territory or planning something. We spent the morning setting up our avalanche monitoring equipment. The work kept us busy, kept us from thinking too much about the tracks. David took pictures of everything, including the strange prints, though he'd stopped making jokes about wilderness mysteries. Rachel's weather instruments showed a storm coming, big one. We might be stuck here for days. That's fine, I said. We've got supplies. But I was lying. Something was very wrong here, and I could feel it getting worse. That afternoon, David said he needed to use the outhouse. It was only 30 yards from the main building, but I didn't like him going alone. Take someone with you, I said. I'm a grown man, Jackson. I can pee by myself. He grabbed his camera. David never went anywhere without that camera and headed outside. 15 minutes later, we heard screaming. I grabbed my rifle and ran outside, Mike right behind me. The outhouse door was hanging open, broken off its hinges. There was blood in the snow, a lot of blood, but no David. David, I shouted. David. Something answered from the tree line. Not David's voice, something else. Something that sounded like David but wasn't quite right, like someone trying to imitate him but not getting it perfect. Help me, the voice called. Please help me. I raised my rifle. That's not him. How do you know? Mike asked. Because David's right there. I pointed to the blood trail leading away from the outhouse. At the end of it, maybe 50 yards into the trees, something hung from a pine branch. It was David. Or what was left of him. His body had been torn apart and arranged like a hunting trophy, but his head was missing. That's why the voice calling to us sounded wrong. Whatever made that sound didn't have David's mouth to work with. Lisa threw up in the snow. Mike started shaking. Rachel just stood there, staring. Inside, I said. Now. We barricaded the doors with furniture and checked all the windows. I handed out the other rifles. Old hunting guns left behind by previous teams. What are we dealing with here? Lisa asked. I thought about my grandfather's stories. About the Atna legends of wolf men who were once human hunters, cursed for breaking sacred laws. Men who became monsters, trapped between human intelligence and animal hunger. I don't know, I lied. The howling started again at sunset, but this time, it wasn't just howling. Mixed in with the animal sounds were words. Broken English, like someone learning to speak for the first time. Come, out, play. We. Hungry, smell, fear. Mike dropped his rifle. That's not possible. Animals can't. The lights went out, emergency lighting kicked in, casting red shadows on the walls. Through the windows, we could see shapes moving in the darkness. Big shapes. Walking on 2 legs. Something scratched at the door. Long, slow scratches that sounded like claws on wood. Can smell you. Then silence. I kept watch all night while the others tried to sleep. Around midnight, I heard footsteps on the roof. Heavy footsteps. Something was walking back and forth up there, like it was looking for a way in. At 3 in the morning, the footsteps stopped. A face appeared at the window. It wasn't human, not anymore. The face was stretched, elongated like a wolf's snout, but with human eyes. Intelligent eyes. It looked right at me and smiled with too many teeth. Then it was gone. But I knew it would be back. They would all be back, and next time, they wouldn't just be watching. Mike disappeared on the second night. He'd volunteered to take watch duty while I got some sleep. When I woke up at dawn, the front door was wide open and Mike was gone. No signs of struggle, no blood, just his rifle lying on the floor and muddy footprints leading outside. They took him, Rachel whispered. I followed the tracks into the forest. They were the same impossible prints, sometimes human, sometimes wolf. But about a quarter-mile from the station, I found something worse than blood. Clothes. Mike's clothes, torn to shreds and scattered in the snow. But no body. Then I heard him screaming. It was coming from deeper in the mountains, echoing off the peaks. Mike's voice, calling for help. But the sound was wrong, like it was coming from too far away to be real. Like an echo of an echo. The screaming went on for hours. "We have to help him," Rachel said. No, I was cleaning my rifle, checking every bullet. That's what they want. They want us to come looking. So we just leave him? He's already gone. The words tasted like poison. Whatever's making that sound, it's not Mike anymore. Lisa was studying the tracks through binoculars. "Jackson, these creatures, they're intelligent. Look at this." She showed me photos from David's camera, the last few pictures before he died. They showed the forest around our station, but there was something in the background, shapes hiding behind trees, watching. "They've been planning this," Lisa said. "They cut our power lines first. Then they took David to scare us. Now Mike, they're picking us off one by one." I counted our ammunition, not enough for a real fight. These things were big, strong, and smart. Worse, they knew the mountains better than we did. "We need to reach the emergency radio," I said. "Call for evacuation." The radio was in a small shed behind the main building, 50 yards of open ground with no cover. "I'll go," I said. "Not alone," Lisa said. "We stick together." Rachel was watching the tree line through the window. "They're out there. I can see them moving." She was right. Dark shapes slipped between the pines like shadows. At least 6 of them, maybe more. They moved wrong. Too fluid for humans, too purposeful for animals. We made our run at noon when the sun was brightest. Lisa and Rachel covered me while I sprinted to the radio shed. The door was locked, but I shot off the padlock and dove inside. The radio was smashed. Every piece of equipment torn apart and scattered. But that wasn't the worst part. On the walls, someone had drawn pictures with what looked like charcoal or blood. They showed humans changing into wolves, bit by bit. The final drawing showed a pack of wolfmen standing over human bodies. At the bottom, in shaky English letters, "You next." I ran back to the station, but halfway there, I heard Lisa scream. Something had broken through the back window. Glass everywhere, furniture overturned. Rachel was backed against the wall, holding a rifle with shaking hands. "Where's Lisa?" I shouted. Rachel pointed to the broken window. They grabbed her. "She's still alive, I can hear her." From outside came the sound of Lisa sobbing, pleading. But her voice was getting farther away. I knew what they were doing. They were taking her deeper into the mountains, like they'd taken Mike. But they were keeping her alive on purpose. They wanted us to hear her. They wanted us to follow. That's when I realized these things weren't just hunting us, they were playing with us. As darkness fell, the howling started again. But now it was different. Some of the voices sounded familiar. Mike's voice, calling my name, Lisa's voice, begging for help. "It's a trick," I told Rachel. "They're trying to draw us out. What if it's really them? What if they're still alive?" I didn't answer. Because deep down, I was afraid they were alive. Alive and changing into something else. Around midnight, one of the voices calling to us sounded different. Deeper. More confident. "Jackson," it said. "We need to talk." I went to the window. In the moonlight, I could see a shape standing at the edge of the trees. Tall as a man, but wrong in every other way. It had the basic shape of a human, but stretched and twisted like it was being pulled apart. "You're the pack leader," I said. "I was Dr. Richard Hayes," the thing said. Its voice was like gravel in a cement mixer. Before the change. Before the curse. Hayes. I knew that name. He'd led the research team that disappeared in 1963. 20 years, Hayes continued. 20 years we've wandered these mountains. Hungry, looking for a way to end it. What do you want? Fresh. Blood. New pack members. The curse spreads through bites, Jackson. Your friends. They're changing. Join us willingly, and we'll make it quick. I raised my rifle. Go to hell. Hayes laughed, a sound like breaking bones. We tried dying, Jackson. It doesn't work. The mountain won't let us go. He melted back into the darkness, but his words stayed with me. If they couldn't die, how could we possibly win? On the third night, Mike came back. I saw him through the window just before dawn, stumbling through the snow toward our station. He looked human enough from a distance, but something was wrong with the way he moved. Too stiff. Like his joints didn't work right anymore. "Mike!" Rachel ran toward the door. I grabbed her arm. "Wait. It's Mike. He's alive. Look at his eyes." Mike's eyes reflected the moonlight like an animal's. And when he opened his mouth to speak, I saw teeth that were too sharp, too long. "Jackson," he said, but his voice was different now, rougher. "Help me, please. I'm changing." He held up his hands. His fingernails had grown into claws, and dark hair was sprouting along his arms. "The bite," he whispered. "Hayes bit me. I can feel it happening. I can hear them in my head, all of them. The pack calls to me." Rachel started crying. "We have to help him." "You can't help me," Mike said. He was shaking now, fighting something inside himself. "But you can stop me, before I become like them." I understood what he was asking. I raised my rifle. "Jackson, please, I don't want to hurt anyone, but I can feel the hunger growing. Soon I won't be able to fight it." "There has to be another way," Rachel said. "There is no other way." Mike's voice was getting deeper, more animal-like. "Do it now, while I'm still me enough to ask." I pulled the trigger. Mike fell into the snow and didn't get up. Rachel screamed at me, but I'd made the right choice. In the moonlight, I could see his body, already starting to change back to human as death released him from the curse. That's when Hayes stepped out of the forest. "Touching," he said, "but pointless. We have the woman, and soon we'll have both of you." Behind him, more shapes emerged from the trees. The pack, 7 of them now, walking upright like men but moving like predators. In the middle of the pack, I saw Lisa. She was alive but changed. Wolf ears poked through her hair, and her fingernails had become claws. But her eyes were still human, still terrified. "The transformation takes 3 days," Hayes said. "She has 12 hours left. After that, she'll be one of us forever." "What do you want?" I asked. "Single combat. You and me. If you win, the woman goes free. If you lose," he smiled with too many teeth, "she gets a packmate for eternity." I looked at Rachel. She was loading bullets into Mike's rifle with steady hands. "No deal," I said. "We fight you all right here." Hayes shrugged. "Your choice. But remember, bullets only slow us down. We've been shot before. Many times." The pack spread out, surrounding the station. They moved with military precision, covering every exit. I had one chance. The avalanche charges. Every research station in avalanche country kept emergency explosives for triggering controlled slides. Our charges were in a metal box under my bunk, enough TNT to bring down half the mountain. "Rachel," I whispered, "can you keep them busy for 60 seconds?" She nodded and started firing through the windows. The bullets hit the pack members and knocked them down, but Hayes was right. They got back up. I ran to the back room and grabbed the charges. Simple timer detonators, just like the army had taught me. I set them for 2 minutes and ran back. "We need to get out of here," I told Rachel. "Where? They're everywhere." Through the window, I could see Hayes dragging Lisa toward the station. She was fighting him, but not with full strength. The curse was winning. I made my choice. I opened the front door and stepped outside. "Hayes, you want single combat? You got it." The pack leader smiled and shoved Lisa aside. He was bigger up close, 8 feet tall and covered in coarse black fur. His face was a nightmare mix of human and wolf. 90 seconds, I whispered to myself. Hayes charged. I emptied my rifle into his chest. He stumbled but kept coming. His claws raked across my shoulder, tearing through my jacket like paper. I rolled aside and came up with my knife. Hayes was faster than any human had a right to be. But I had training. I'd fought men and animals before. 60 seconds. Hayes grabbed my wrist and squeezed. I heard bones crack, but with my other hand, I drove the knife into his throat. Black blood poured out, but he didn't fall. Instead, he bit down on my shoulder. The pain was incredible, like fire and ice at the same time. I could feel something dark spreading through my veins. 30 seconds. "Rachel, run," I shouted. Haze threw me against the station wall. My vision went black for a moment. When it cleared, the pack was closing in. 15 seconds. I grabbed Rachel's hand. The rocks behind the station. Get behind the big rocks. We ran. Haze and his pack followed, howling with rage. 10 seconds. We dove behind a boulder the size of a pickup truck. 5 seconds. Haze rounded the corner, claws extended. The explosion lit up the night like a second sun. The avalanche charges didn't just destroy the research station. They triggered something much bigger. The whole mountainside came down in a roar of snow and ice and stone. Haze and most of his pack disappeared under millions of tons of debris. The sound was like the end of the world. When the snow settled, Rachel and I were the only things moving in a landscape of white death. But Lisa was gone, buried somewhere under the avalanche. And my shoulder burned where Haze had bitten me. The rescue helicopter found us 3 days later, half frozen and barely alive. Rachel had frostbite on her fingers, but she'd survive. The official report blamed everything on a freak avalanche and unusually aggressive bears. No one asked too many questions. In Alaska, mountains kill people all the time. They transferred me to a remote posting in Denali, far from populated areas. The doctor said I'd recovered completely from my injuries, but I knew better. The bite mark on my shoulder had healed, but something else was changing. My hearing got sharper. Smells became overwhelming. And every night, I dreamed of running through snow on 4 legs, hunting with a pack that called to me across the darkness. 3 months after the avalanche, I started hearing reports from villages near the mountain. Livestock killed in ways that didn't match any known predator. Hunters finding tracks that were too big, too brave. Are human. One of Haze's pack had survived. I could feel it out there, searching for others like itself, building a new pack. And every full moon, the call got stronger in my head. The curse spreads through bites, Haze had said. I'd killed Mike to save him from becoming a monster, but I hadn't been fast enough to save myself. Last week, I found myself standing outside my cabin at midnight, wearing only shorts in below-zero weather. I wasn't cold. My feet were bare, but I could feel every texture in the snow. I could smell a rabbit hiding in the bushes 50 yards away. I could hear my heartbeat slowing, syncing with something else, something wild and patient and hungry. Tomorrow, I'm driving back to Anchorage to turn in my resignation. I've already written letters to my family, telling them I'm taking a job on a research station in Antarctica, somewhere far from people, because I can feel the change coming. In my dreams now, I run with the pack, 7 members, strong again. We hunt together, think together, kill together. And sometimes, in those dreams, I'm not the newest member anymore. Sometimes I'm leading the hunt. The Chugach Mountains are vast and empty, plenty of room for monsters to hide, plenty of hikers and researchers and photographers who think they understand wilderness. People like I used to be. I'm writing this story down so someone will know what really happened up there. So, when the reports start coming in about missing persons and impossible tracks, maybe someone will remember. Maybe someone will be smart enough to stay away from the mountains in March, when the snow is soft and the avalanche risk is high, when the pack is hungry, when the wolf men come down from the peaks to hunt. My name is Jackson Steelwater, and I was a park ranger for 12 years. Now I'm something else. Something that howls at the moon and dreams of human flesh. Something that's running out of time to warn you. Stay away from the mountains. The pack is always looking for new members. My name is Marcus Thornfield, and I need to tell you what really happened at Karluk Lake in October of 1962. The official report says equipment failure and bear attack killed 3 researchers. That's a lie. I know because I was there. I was the head ranger, and I let it happen. At 29, I was the youngest head ranger in Alaska's history. 8 years in the wilderness, plus my time as a Marine in Korea, made me cocky. I thought I knew everything about bears. Hell, I'd tracked wounded browns through blizzards, faced down charging sows protecting cubs. In Korea, I'd killed 30 enemy soldiers and walked away without a scratch. Nothing scared me. That was my first mistake. The Kodiak National Wildlife Refuge stretched for miles around Karluk Lake. My research station sat on the north shore, a small log cabin with a radio tower, boat dock, and storage shed. October meant salmon run season. Bears were fattening up for winter, and they got aggressive when hungry. But I'd handled 1,200-pound browns before. This was just another assignment. The morning of October 15th, I was cleaning my 30-06 rifle when the radio crackled to life. Old Pavel Koniak's voice came through the static. He was Alutiak, one of the native elders from Kodiak village. "Marcus, you need to leave the lake. Grandfather Bear is walking again." I set down my rifle and grabbed the radio mic. "Morning, Pavel. What's this about a grandfather bear?" "One, not a grandfather bear. The grandfather bear. My people have stories going back hundreds of years. When the salmon run heavy and the storms come early, he wakes up hungry." I laughed. I actually laughed at him. "Pavel, old man, I've handled every kind of brown bear Alaska has. Your ghost stories don't scare Marines." The radio went quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. Then his voice came back. Different somehow. Colder. "You think your guns and your war experience make you safe? Grandfather Bear was here when my great-great-grandfather was young. He'll be here when your great-great-grandson is old. Leave the lake, Marcus. Don't make him hunt you." "Thanks for the warning, Pavel, but I've got 3 researchers coming in today. I can't abandon my post because of some legend." "Then may the spirits have mercy on you all." The radio clicked off. I shook my head and went back to cleaning my rifle. Superstitious nonsense. I'd heard all the native stories before: spirit bears, shapeshifters, ancient guardians, just ways to explain things they didn't understand. I understood bears. I'd studied their behavior, tracked their movements, knew their habits better than most bears knew themselves. Around noon, I took the boat out to check my salmon traps. The lake was mirror smooth, reflecting the gray October sky. Mountains rose on all sides, their peaks already white with early snow. Beautiful country, but harsh, unforgiving to the unprepared. That's when I found the first sign. Something was wrong. On the south shore, near Bear Creek, I discovered a kill site. But not just any kill. This was a massive brown bear, maybe 800 pounds, torn apart like tissue paper. I'd seen bears fight before, seen the aftermath of territory disputes. This was different. The claw marks were enormous, wider than my spread hand, deeper than anything I'd ever seen. Most disturbing was what remained. The bear had been partially eaten, but not the way another bear would eat. Organs were missing in a pattern that made no sense. The heart was gone, the brain was gone, but most of the meat was left to rot. I measured the tracks around the kill site. They were bear tracks, but huge. Bigger than any brown bear I'd ever encountered. The front paws measured 15 inches long, with claw marks extending another 6 inches beyond the pads. Standing there in the afternoon shadows, with the smell of death thick in the air, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Korea. A cold certainty that something was hunting me. But I pushed it down. I was a Marine, a professional. I had a job to do. The researchers would arrive by float plane in a few hours. Dr. Sarah Webb was a wildlife biologist from the University of Alaska. Tom Riley was a nature photographer for National Geographic. Jenny Martinez was a graduate student working on her thesis about brown bear hibernation patterns. I had to keep them safe. Looking back at that massive carcass, listening to the unnatural silence of the forest around me, I should have radioed for immediate evacuation, should have called off the research mission, should have listened to Pavel's warning. Instead, I loaded fresh shells into my rifle and headed back to the cabin to wait for my guests. The sun was setting behind the mountains when I heard the float plane's engine echoing across the lake. The plane touched down just as the last light faded from the sky. I met them at the dock with a Coleman lantern, helping unload their gear. Dr. Webb was a small, serious woman in her 40s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Tom Riley was built like a lumberjack, maybe 50 years old, with expensive camera equipment and an easy smile. Jenny Martinez couldn't have been older than 25, nervous but eager, clutching a notebook like a lifeline. "Welcome to Karluk Lake," I said, shaking hands all around. "Hope you're ready for some real wilderness." "This is incredible," Jenny breathed, looking out at the dark water reflecting stars. "So isolated, so pristine." Tom was already snapping pictures with a flash camera. "The light up here is going to be amazing. Can't wait to see these bears you've been studying." I thought about the torn-apart carcass I'd found that afternoon. About that, we need to talk safety protocols. This isn't Yellowstone. These are wild Kodiak browns, and they're preparing for hibernation. Hungry and aggressive. Dr. Webb nodded seriously. We've all worked in bear country before. Marcus, we know the risks. If only that had been true. I got them settled in the cabin's main room while I took the small back bedroom. They were excited, chattering about their research plans over coffee and canned stew. Tom wanted sunrise shots of bears fishing for salmon. Jenny hoped to observe denning behavior. Dr. Webb planned to collect hair samples for genetic studies. One rule, I told them as we prepared for bed: nobody goes anywhere alone, ever. I don't care if you're just walking to the outhouse. Take someone with you and carry bear spray. You're pretty paranoid for someone who's supposed to be the expert, Tom said with a grin. Paranoid keeps you breathing? I replied. We all went to bed around 10 o'clock. The cabin was solid and warm, built to withstand Alaskan winters. I lay in my narrow bunk listening to the others settling in, to the wind picking up outside, to the small sounds of the wilderness night. Somewhere around midnight, I woke to absolute silence. Not normal, quiet, complete, unnatural silence. No wind in the trees, no water lapping the shore. No insects or small animals moving in the brush. It was like the entire forest was holding its breath. I grabbed my rifle and moved to the window. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the lake and surrounding forest. Everything looked normal, but the silence pressed against my eardrums like deep water pressure. Then I saw movement at the tree line. Something massive shifted between the pines, too large to be any bear I'd ever encountered. For just a moment, I caught a glimpse of amber eyes reflecting moonlight. Eyes set too high off the ground, eyes filled with an intelligence that made my skin crawl. The thing, whatever it was, studied the cabin for a long moment. Then it melted back into the forest without a sound. I stood at that window until dawn, rifle ready, watching the shadows. The normal sounds of night gradually returned around 3 a.m. Birds began singing at first light, but I knew something unnatural had been out there, something that was now aware of us. I was making coffee when Tom stumbled out of the main room, yawning and rubbing his eyes. Morning, Marcus. Sleep well? Fine, I lied. You're up early. Photographer's habits. Golden hour waits for no one. He grabbed his camera gear and headed for the door. Going to catch the sunrise from the dock. Hold on, safety protocols, remember? I'll come with you. Relax, it's just the dock. I can see it from here. He was out the door before I could stop him. I cursed and followed, leaving my rifle inside. Through the window, I could see Dr. Webb and Jenny still sleeping. Tom was already at the end of the dock, adjusting his camera settings. The sun was just breaking over the mountains, painting the lake golden red. It was beautiful. Peaceful. That should have been my second warning. Great light, Tom called back to me. This is going to be perfect for... His words cut off in a wet, choking sound. I spun around to see him lifted off his feet by something I couldn't quite see clearly. His camera fell into the lake with a splash. For a moment, he seemed to be floating in midair, arms and legs thrashing. Then I heard the sound of ribs cracking like dry kindling. Tom! I ran toward the dock, but whatever had him was already moving, dragging him toward the forest with impossible speed. I caught one clear glimpse before they disappeared into the trees. Tom's body hung from massive jaws like a rag doll. His eyes were still open, still aware. Blood ran from his mouth in a steady stream. Then they were gone. I stood there on the dock, breathing hard, trying to make sense of what I'd just witnessed. Tom Riley was gone. Taken by something that shouldn't exist. Something that had lifted a 200-pound man like he weighed nothing. Dr. Webb and Jenny came running from the cabin, drawn by my shouts. "Where's Tom?" Dr. Webb demanded. I looked at the forest where he'd disappeared. At the blood drops on the dock planks. At his expensive camera sinking into the dark water. Bear attack, I heard myself say. Big brown bear came out of nowhere. Took him into the woods. It was the first of many lies I'd tell over the next few days. Lies to protect their sanity. Lies to protect my own. But deep down, I knew the truth. We weren't dealing with any ordinary bear. We found Tom's body at dawn the next day, about half a mile into the forest. What was left of him? I made Dr. Webb and Jenny stay back while I examined the scene. Tom lay in a small clearing, his body arranged in a way that made my marine training scream warnings. This wasn't random violence. This was deliberate. His chest had been opened with surgical precision. Heart and lungs were missing entirely. His skull had been cracked open like an egg, the brain removed. But strangest of all, the body had been completely drained of blood. Not a drop remained in his tissues. The tracks around the clearing were massive, the same impossible prints I'd found at yesterday's kill site. But mixed in with the bear tracks were others, smaller, almost human-shaped but wrong somehow. The toes were too long, ending in points that gouged deep marks in the earth. "What kind of bear does that?" Dr. Webb whispered behind me. I hadn't heard her approach. "I told you to stay back. I'm a biologist, Marcus. I've seen animal predation before. This isn't normal behavior." I stood up slowly, blocking her view of the body. Sometimes old boars go rogue. Brain parasites, starvation, territorial madness, they can become unpredictable. She stared at me with those sharp eyes. "You're lying." Before I could respond, Jenny's scream echoed from the direction of the cabin. We ran through the forest, crashing through undergrowth, following the sound of her terror. I had my rifle ready, safety off, expecting to find another attack in progress. Instead, we found Jenny standing in the cabin doorway, pointing at the radio equipment. The antenna had been torn down. Not broken by wind or weather, torn down. The metal tower was twisted into an impossible spiral, like someone had grabbed it with both hands and wrung it out like a wet towel. No bear could do that. Nothing natural could do that. "The radio's dead," Jenny said, her voice shaking. "I was trying to call for help, for evacuation. The whole system is destroyed." I examined the twisted metal. The breaks were clean, showing enormous force applied with precision. Whatever had done this possessed both incredible strength and human-like intelligence. "We can fix it," I said, not believing my own words. "With what?" Dr. Webb demanded. "Half the components are missing entirely." That's when I noticed the boat. Our only other means of escape sat low in me. The water at the dock. The engine housing had been torn open. Vital parts were scattered on the dock or thrown into the lake. The fuel lines had been cut with what looked like claws, gasoline forming rainbow slicks on the dark water. We were trapped, 120 miles from the nearest settlement. No radio, no boat, no way to call for help. "Okay," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "We wait for the supply plane. It's due in 8 days. 8 days. Jenny's voice climbed toward hysteria. "With that thing out there? We'll be fine. This cabin is solid. We have food, water, weapons. We just need to stay calm and stay together." But even as I said it, I could feel something watching us from the forest. Something patient. Something that knew we had nowhere to run. That afternoon, while Dr. Webb tried to salvage radio parts and I reinforced the cabin's windows, Jenny announced she needed to use the outhouse. "I'll come with you, Doctor," Webb offered. "It's 20 feet away," Jenny protested. "I can see it from the window." I should have insisted, should have gone with her myself, should have remembered that Tom had been just at the dock when he was taken. Instead, I let her go alone. Jenny made it to the outhouse without incident. We watched through the window as she closed the door behind her. Dr. Webb went back to working on the radio. I continued hammering boards over the windows. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. "She's taking a long time," Dr. Webb said. I set down my hammer and grabbed the rifle. "Jenny," I called. "You okay out there?" No answer. Dr. Webb and I approached the outhouse together. The door hung slightly open, moving in the breeze. I pushed it wider with the rifle barrel. Empty. But not just empty, wrong. The wooden floor had been torn up from underneath. Claw marks gouged deep furrows in the logs, and there was blood, not much, just a few drops, leading away into the forest. "Jenny," Dr. Webb screamed. "Jenny!" Her voice echoed off the mountains and faded into silence. Then, from deep in the woods, we heard Jenny's voice calling back. "Help me, please, it's got me. I can't. Oh God, I can't move my legs." Dr. Webb started toward the forest, but I grabbed her arm. "That's not Jenny. What are you talking about?" "Of course it's Jenny," the voice called again. Same tone, same words, exactly the same words. Like a recording being played back. "Help me, please, it's got me. I can't. Oh God, I can't move my legs." Dr. Webb's face went white. The voice was coming from 3 different directions now, north, south, and east, all calling with Jenny's exact words in Jenny's exact voice. "What is that thing?" "Doctor," Webb whispered. Before I could answer, Tom Riley's voice joined the chorus. "Great light, this is going to be perfect for," the wet, choking sound that had cut off his last words. Then Tom's voice again, from a different, "Great light, this is going to be perfect for," the choking sound. Over and over, Jenny begging for help. Tom's last words. Playing from all around us like some nightmare echo chamber, I grabbed Dr. Webb and pulled her back toward the cabin. "Inside, now." We barricaded ourselves in the main room as the voices continued outside. Sometimes they were far away, sometimes right outside the windows. Always the same phrases, repeated exactly. Always the voices of the dead. As darkness fell, the voices finally stopped. But something else began. Scratching. Long, deliberate scratches against the cabin walls, moving slowly around the building, testing for weakness, looking for a way in. I held my rifle ready, watching the boarded windows. Dr. Webb sat beside me with a skinning knife, her hands shaking. "What is it?" she whispered. "What does it want?" Through a gap in the boards, I caught a glimpse of amber eyes reflecting our lamplight. Eyes that belonged to something that stood upright like a man but was the size of a grizzly bear. "I think," I said quietly, "it wants to hunt us." The scratching continued until dawn. The next morning, I found the cave. While Dr. Webb slept fitfully in the cabin, I explored the area behind our storage shed. What I discovered changed everything. Hidden behind a wall of fallen rocks was an opening leading into the mountainside. The entrance was just large enough for a man to crawl through, but it opened into a vast underground chamber. My flashlight beam revealed walls covered with paintings. Alutiiq art, hundreds of years old. But these weren't the usual hunting scenes or spiritual symbols. These paintings told a story. A warning. The first panel showed normal bears fishing for salmon. Alutiiq hunters taking what they needed, showing respect for the animal's spirits. The second panel showed different hunters. White men with guns, killing bears for sport, leaving carcasses to rot. The third panel showed something rising from the earth. A massive bear-like figure with human hands and glowing eyes. It was hunting the white hunters. The fourth panel showed the creature growing larger, more powerful, feeding on those who disrespected the land. The final panel showed the truth that made my blood run cold. The creature had once been human, an Alutiiq shaman who had merged with the bear spirit to protect his people's land. But the fusion had gone wrong. Instead of becoming a guardian, he'd become something else. Something that hungered not just for flesh, but for the very essence of life itself. And he was immortal. At the bottom of the cave, I found more recent evidence. Human skulls arranged in a ritual pattern. Some looked decades old. Others were fresh. One still had Jenny's hair ribbon tied around it. That's when I heard Dr. Webb screaming from the cabin. I crawled out of the cave and ran back to find her standing in the doorway, pointing at the forest with a shaking hand. "It spoke to me," she whispered. "It used my dead husband's voice." Before I could respond, the voice came again. Deep and resonant, but unmistakably human in its cadence. "Sarah Webb, you study my bears. You count them like cattle. You reduce sacred creatures to numbers on your papers." The voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, echoing off the mountains. "Where is it?" I demanded, raising my rifle. "Marcus Thornfield." Now it was addressing me, and the voice changed. Became familiar. It was my father's voice. The father who died when I was 12. "My son, so proud, so strong, you think your wars taught you about death? You know nothing about death. My father is dead." I called out to the forest. "Yes, I killed him, 20 years ago. I spoke to him in your mother's voice, led him into the woods. He screamed your name as I opened his chest. I felt something break inside me. Dad's hunting trip. The one he never came back from. They'd found his truck by the lake, but never his body. Never any sign of what happened." "You're lying." "I still have his voice, Marcus. Would you like to hear his last words? The thing in the forest began to speak in my father's voice, telling me things only my father could have known. Childhood memories, private jokes, the last conversation we'd had before he left for that hunting trip. Stop it, I whispered. He spoke of you as he died. Said he was proud of his Marine boy. Said he hoped you'd be smarter than him. Doctor. Webb grabbed my arm. Don't listen to it, it's trying to break you down. But the voice continued, now switching between my father, Tom, and Jenny. All of them telling me I'd failed them. All of them blaming me for their deaths. That's when I understood the truth. This wasn't random. The creature hadn't stumbled upon us by accident. It had been hunting me specifically. It knew about my father. Knew about my past. It had been planning this for 20 years. What do you want? I shouted. The forest went silent. Then the creature stepped into view. 15 feet tall, covered in thick brown fur. But its front limbs were grotesquely human, oversized arms ending in massive hands tipped with 6-inch claws. Its face was the worst part. Bear-like snout and ears, but human eyes, intelligent eyes filled with ancient hunger. I want you to understand, it said in my father's voice. This land is sacred. The bears are sacred. Men like you see only resources to exploit, animals to study and catalog and control. I'm a ranger. I protect wildlife. You protect nothing. You count and measure and pretend you understand, but you see only meat and data. Your father was the same, so certain of his dominance over nature. The creature began walking toward the cabin with slow, deliberate steps. I have consumed thousands over the centuries. Hunters, miners, settlers, researchers. All those who forget their place in the natural order. And from each one, I take their voice. Their memories. Their essence becomes part of my eternal hunt. I aimed my rifle at its massive chest and fired. The bullet struck home with a wet thump, but the creature didn't even slow down. The wound closed almost immediately, fur growing back over unblemished skin. You cannot kill what is already dead, Marcus Thornfield. Behind me, Dr. Webb was searching through our supplies. The cave paintings, she said suddenly. Did you see any weapons? Any way the Alutiiq fought this thing? I thought about the ritual arrangements in the cave. The careful placement of skulls and bones. There was a knife, carved from walrus ivory, looked ceremonial. Get it. Now, the creature was almost to the cabin. I could smell it now, death and decay and something else, something wild and ancient. I'll hold it off, I told Dr. Webb. You get to the cave. I'm not leaving you. Go. She ran toward the back of the cabin while I emptied my rifle at the approaching monster. The bullets tore chunks of flesh from its body, but they healed instantly. Black blood flowed from the wounds, then stopped as the skin knitted itself together. The creature reached the cabin and began tearing boards from the windows with its massive claws. Each swipe removed chunks of log wall like they were cardboard. I grabbed my hunting knife and waited. When its arm reached through the window, I slashed at the wrist with all my strength. The blade bit deep, and for the first time, the creature roared in what might have been pain. But the wound healed in seconds. Iron cannot harm me, it said in Tom's voice. Only the old ways. Only the sacred blade. Dr. Webb came running back from the cave, carrying something wrapped in rotted leather. Here. She threw the bundle to me. Inside was a knife carved from yellowed ivory, its handle decorated, with symbols I didn't recognize. The blade itself was sharp, obsidian, black as midnight. The moment I touched it, the creature stopped its attack. You found it, it said, and for the first time, I heard uncertainty in its voice. What is it? The blade that made me, the knife that bound spirit to flesh. It can also unbind. I looked at the weapon in my hand. It felt warm, almost alive. If I kill you with this, you'll die? If you wound me with it, yes. But first, you must choose. The creature straightened to its full height, towering over the cabin. Leave this place, take your woman and go. Never return to Alaska. Never speak of what you've seen. Do this, and I will let you live. And if I refuse, then you will join the hunt. Your voice will be mine forever. You will help me find others who need to learn respect for the sacred. I looked at Dr. Webb. She was young, brilliant, with her whole life ahead of her. She deserved to go home. 2. Forget this nightmare. But I thought about my father, about Tom and Jenny, about all the others this thing had killed over the centuries. "There's a third option," I said. I lunged forward with the obsidian knife. The creature moved faster than anything that large should move, but I was already inside its reach. The blade sliced across its chest, cutting deep through fur and flesh. This time, the wound didn't heal. The creature stumbled backward, black blood pouring from the gash. Its roar shook the windows of the cabin. "You stupid boy, you could have lived," it lashed out with both massive hands. I tried to dodge, but claws raked across my left hand, taking 3 fingers cleanly off. I screamed but kept hold of the knife. The creature lunged again. I rolled aside and slashed at its leg. The obsidian blade cut through muscle and sinew. More black blood sprayed across the cabin wall. "Impossible," it gasped. "The binding, it cannot be." But even as it weakened, I could feel something happening to me. Where its claws had touched my hand, a burning sensation spread up my arm. My senses were becoming sharper. I could smell Dr. Webb's fear, hear her heartbeat, sense the creature's pain like it was my own. The ritual knife wasn't just harming the monster. It was connecting us. "You see now," the creature wheezed. "To kill me, you must take my place. The land requires a guardian. The bears need protection." I looked at my mutilated hand. Already, the stumps of my missing fingers were growing darker, more claw-like. "Choose quickly," the creature continued. "Your transformation has begun. Kill me and accept the burden, or let me live and join me willingly." Through the cabin window, I could see the float plane approaching across the lake. Our rescue, arriving 3 days early. Dr. Webb saw it too. "Marcus, we can go home. We can leave right now." I looked at the knife in my good hand, at the weakening creature before me, at the approaching plane that represented safety and normalcy. But I also thought about the Alutiiq paintings, about the centuries of death, about what this thing would do to the next group of researchers who came here. I drove the obsidian blade into the creature's heart. The creature died with my father's voice on its lips, speaking words of love and pride that I'd waited 20 years to hear again. As its massive body collapsed, something flowed out of it like smoke, like a dark river seeking a new channel. That something flowed into me. The rescue team found us 3 hours later. By then, I'd managed to get the cabin fire under control and hide the evidence of supernatural activity. The twisted radio tower, I claimed, had been damaged by high winds. The destroyed boat engine was explained as sabotage by the rogue bear that killed our colleagues. I sat calmly in the ruins of the cabin, cradling my mangled hand, while Dr. Webb gave her statement to the authorities. 3 mangled bodies lay arranged around me. What remained of Tom, Jenny, and a massive brown bear I claimed to have killed in self-defense. The investigators bought the story. Equipment failure, bear attack, tragic accident in the wilderness. These things happened. Alaska was dangerous. Case closed. Dr. Webb never spoke publicly about what really happened. She left Alaska the day after our rescue and never returned. But sometimes she writes to me, careful letters asking how I'm doing, if I'm okay, if I need anything. I always write back that I'm fine. That's a lie. The transformation completed itself over the following months. My missing fingers grew back as claws. My senses sharpened until I could track a mouse through snow or hear a heartbeat from 100 yards away. My body grew stronger, more resilient. Food became less necessary. Sleep became optional. And the voices started. Tom's voice, perfectly preserved, speaking his last words over and over. Jenny calling for help from the darkness. My father telling me he's proud of his Marine boy. Dozens of others, stretching back through decades of the creature's hunting. I understand now what I've become, what I chose to become, the guardian of Kodiak Island, protector of the sacred bears, hunter of those who would exploit or harm this ancient wilderness. Most visitors to the refuge are respectful. Genuine researchers, native fishermen, tourists who follow the rules and keep appropriate distance from wildlife. They have nothing to fear from me, but sometimes others come. Trophy hunters seeking massive bears for their walls. Developers looking to exploit natural resources. Scientists who see the bears as nothing more than data points to be collected. Those people learn what Tom and Jenny learned, that some places are sacred, some creatures are beyond human understanding, and some guardians are more monster than man. The official reports always blame equipment, failure, and bear attacks. The bodies, when they're found, show the brutal efficiency of claws and teeth. No evidence of supernatural involvement survives the scene. I'm careful that way, Doctor. Webb was right about one thing. I am protecting wildlife now, more effectively than any ranger with a badge and a rifle ever could. The bears on Kodiak Island thrive under my watch. Poaching has dropped to zero. Unauthorized research activities have ceased entirely. The price is my humanity. And the hunger. God. The hunger. It starts as a whisper in the back of my mind, telling me about new arrivals to the island, researchers who laugh at native warnings, hunters who see dollar signs in bear pelts, photographers who get too close to cubs for the perfect shot. The hunger tells me where they are, how to find them, what voices to use to lure them into the deep woods where accidents happen and evidence disappears. I try to resist it. Some nights I succeed. Other nights I find myself standing over a fresh kill, blood on my claws, another voice added to my collection. And the worst part? Deep down, beneath the horror and the guilt and the isolation, part of me enjoys it. Part of me has always enjoyed the hunt. 3 weeks ago, I heard the float plane again. New researchers, the radio chatter said. A team from outside wanting to study bear hibernation patterns. I know I should warn them away, should find some excuse to keep them from landing, but the hunger is getting stronger, and it's been so long since I've heard new voices. So I'll wait. I'll watch. And when they make their inevitable mistake, when they show disrespect for this sacred place, I'll be ready. After all, someone has to protect the bears. Even if that someone is no longer quite human. The voices whisper to me in the darkness, dozens of them now, all calling my name, all welcoming me home. My name is Eleanor Blackwood, and I've been a park ranger for 15 years. I'm telling you this story because someone needs to know what really happened at Wonder Lake Weather Station in December 1978. The official report says I had a mental breakdown from isolation. They're wrong. What happened to me was real, and it's still out there. I've always been the type of person who needs order. After teaching elementary school for 10 years, I switched to ranger work because I loved the quiet and the routine. I keep detailed records of everything, weather readings, animal sightings, even how many cups of coffee I drink each day. My fellow rangers used to joke that I was more reliable than the atomic clock in Boulder. Wonder Lake Weather Station sits 200 miles from the nearest town, deep in Denali National Park. In December, the sun never rises. It's just endless black sky and temperatures that can freeze your breath before it leaves your mouth. I volunteered for the winter assignment because I was good at being alone. I'd done it before during the brutal winter of 1971, and I came out just fine. The station is small but well built. One main room with the radio equipment and weather instruments, a tiny kitchen, and a bedroom barely big enough for a cot. Everything has its place, and I keep it that way. Order keeps you sane when you're surrounded by millions of acres of wilderness, and the nearest human being is a 3-day snowmobile ride away. I arrived on November 30th with enough supplies to last until the February resupply drop. The routine was simple. Take weather readings every 6 hours, radio the data to headquarters at 6 p.m. sharp, maintain the equipment, and try not to go crazy. I'd done this job so many times I could do it in my sleep. By December 23rd, day 23 of my stay, everything was going perfectly. The weather had been stable, the equipment was working fine, and I hadn't missed a single radio check. I was proud of my record. In 15 years of service, I had never missed a scheduled report. That morning started like every other. I woke up at 6 a.m., made coffee, checked the overnight readings, and wrote everything in the logbook with my usual neat handwriting. Outside, the wind was calm, and the temperature held steady at -38 degrees. Perfect conditions for clear radio transmission later. I was eating breakfast when I opened the logbook to record the morning readings. That's when I saw it. Right there, in handwriting that looked exactly like mine, was an entry I had no memory of making. Asterisk, December 22, 11:47 p.m., temperature, -41 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind, 15 miles per hour NE. Barometric pressure, 30.12. Note, heard someone walking around outside the station. Footsteps in snow. Checked perimeter. No tracks found. E.B. Asterisk. I stared at the page for a full minute. The handwriting was definitely mine, the same small, careful letters I'd been making since grade school. But I hadn't written this. I would have remembered going outside in the middle of the night to look for footsteps. I'm not the kind of person who forgets things like that. I flipped through the previous pages, checking all my entries. Everything else looked normal and matched my memories perfectly. Just that one entry seemed wrong. I told myself I must have been more tired than I thought. Maybe I'd sleepwalked or made the entry in a drowsy state and forgot about it. But the feeling stuck with me all day. Something about seeing my own handwriting, describing something I couldn't remember, made my skin crawl. I found myself looking out the windows more often, scanning the snow for any sign of movement. The endless darkness pressed against the glass like something alive. When 6 p.m. came, I made my radio call to headquarters right on schedule. Denali Base, this is Wonder Lake Station. Weather report for December 23rd. Go ahead, Wonder Lake. Good to hear from you, Eleanor. I gave them the numbers and signed off. Everything normal. Everything exactly as it should be. But that night, as I was getting ready for bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I checked the locks on the door twice, made sure all the windows were secure, and kept the lights on longer than usual. I was being silly, I told myself. 23 days of isolation can make anyone paranoid. I'd get through this assignment just like I'd gotten through all the others. I was Eleanor Blackwood, the ranger who never missed a report, who never lost her cool, who could handle anything the wilderness threw at her. I had no idea how wrong I was. I woke up on December 24th feeling groggy and confused. According to my watch, it was 6 a.m., but I felt like I'd barely slept. My mouth tasted strange, and my stomach felt oddly full. I stumbled to the kitchen and found 2 dirty plates in the sink. 2 plates. I lived alone. I stood there, staring at them, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Both plates had the same meal remnants, bits of canned stew and breadcrumbs. It looked like I'd eaten dinner twice, but I could only remember eating once. My hands shook as I washed the dishes. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe I'd been sleepwalking again. Maybe the isolation was affecting me more than I thought. I made my morning coffee and tried to push the worry away. The weather readings were normal, so I recorded them and went about my usual routine. But throughout the day, I kept finding small things that didn't make sense. The coffee can was in the wrong cabinet. My favorite pen was missing from the desk drawer. The radio volume was turned up higher than I ever kept it. Little things, tiny things that could easily be explained by tiredness or stress, but they kept adding up. That afternoon, while checking the equipment outside, I found footprints in the snow around the weather station. They were fresh, probably made some time after the last snowfall 2 days ago. But here's what made my blood freeze. They were my footprints. The size was right, the tread pattern matched my boots perfectly. There was even the small nick in the left sole where I'd stepped on a sharp rock last month. The problem was, I hadn't been walking around the station. My only trip outside that day had been this one, and I was looking at tracks that circled the building multiple times. Someone wearing my exact boots had been pacing around the station while I was inside. I followed the tracks with growing dread. They went around the building 3 times, stopped at each window, as if someone had been peering inside, and then disappeared into the tree line. I checked my boots. Both pairs were exactly where I'd left them, and neither had snow on them. Back inside, I grabbed the logbook and flipped to the entry I'd found yesterday. Below it, in the same handwriting, was something new. Asterisk December 24, 2:15 p.m., found my own footprints outside. This doesn't make sense. I'm the only person here. Need to stay calm and think logically. E.B. Asterisk. I hadn't written that. I was sure I hadn't written that. But there it was, in my own hand, describing exactly what I'd just experienced. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. I grabbed the radio and switched it on, even though it wasn't time for the scheduled check-in. Denali Base, this is Wonder Lake Station. Do you copy? Static filled the room. Then, clear as anything, I heard my own voice coming through the radio. Help me, there's someone else here. She looks exactly like me. I jerked my hand away from the microphone. I hadn't said those words, but it was definitely my voice, with the same slight accent, the same way I pronounced my words. "Who is this?" I said into the radio. Silence. Just the normal background static. I tried calling headquarters again, but got no response. Either the radio was malfunctioning, or headquarters was offline for some reason. I was completely alone with whatever was happening to me. That evening, I sat at the small table and tried to eat dinner, but my appetite was gone. Every shadow seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at it. Every creak of the building settling made me jump. I decided to write down everything that had happened, hoping that seeing it on paper might help me figure out what was going on. But when I looked at the notepad, there was already writing on it. My writing. Eleanor. I know you're confused. I'm confused too. I think there are two of us now. I'm hiding in the storage shed. Don't trust the other one. Eleanor times. The storage shed was 50 yards from the main station. I grabbed a flashlight and my heaviest coat, then stepped out into the brutal cold. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness as I trudged through the snow to the small shed where we kept extra equipment. The door was unlocked. Inside, huddled in the corner with a blanket around her shoulders, was me. She looked up when the light hit her, and I was staring into my own face. Same brown hair, same green eyes, same small scar on my chin from a childhood accident. She was wearing my spare uniform and even had the same nervous habit of biting her lower lip when she was scared. "Oh, thank God," she said, and her voice was exactly mine. I was starting to think I was going crazy. "Who are you?" I managed to say. "I'm Eleanor Blackwood," she said. "I'm the ranger assigned to this station. The question is, who are you?" We stared at each other in the harsh beam of the flashlight. She knew things only I should know: my middle name, my mother's maiden name, the exact date I started working for the Park Service. When I asked her about my first day of teaching, she described it perfectly, down to the little girl in the front row who cried because she missed her mother. But I remembered all those things too. They were my memories, my experiences, my life. "This is impossible," I said. "I know," she replied. "But here we are." The other Eleanor and I sat in the main station, drinking coffee and trying to figure out what was happening to us. It was like looking in a mirror, except the mirror was talking back. She remembered everything I remembered, had all the same scars and mannerisms, even knew the contents of my last letter from my sister. "I woke up 3 days ago in the snow about a mile from here," she explained. "I was confused and disoriented, but I knew I was supposed to be at Wonder Lake Station. When I got here, all my stuff was inside, but I couldn't remember how I'd gotten there or why I was outside. 3 days ago," I said slowly. "That's when I found the logbook entry I didn't remember writing." "What logbook entry?" I showed her the note about hearing footsteps. Her face went pale. "I wrote that," she said. I remember writing it. You were walking around outside the station that I could see your silhouette in the windows. But I was asleep inside. You're the one who was outside." We looked at each other, both realizing the same terrifying thing. If her story was true, then we'd both been here for 3 days without knowing about each other. But that was impossible. The station was too small to hide in. "Maybe one of us is dreaming," I suggested. She pinched herself hard enough to leave a mark. "I don't think so." I did the same, wincing at the sharp pain. "Me neither." Over the next few hours, we compared our memories in detail. Everything matched perfectly up until 3 days ago. After that, our experiences diverged. She remembered being outside, while I remembered being inside. I remembered finding 2 plates, while she remembered eating only once. "There's something else," she said as we were going through our personal belongings. "I found this in my jacket pocket." She pulled out a small piece of paper with writing on, my writing. But neither of us remembered making the note. "Day 1, the copying has begun. Eleanor 1 is unaware, must not let her discover the truth yet. The feeding requires gradual absorption." Times I felt sick. "Feeding? What does that mean?" "I don't know, but look at this." She showed me her hands. At first they looked normal, but when I looked closer, I could see that her fingerprints were slightly different from mine. Not enough that most people would notice, but I'd been taking my own fingerprints for security clearance updates for years. "We need to call for help," I said. "I tried. The radio isn't working properly. I went to the radio equipment and tried to contact headquarters. The response was immediate, but it wasn't headquarters. It was my own voice again, but speaking words neither of us was saying. Day 4. Eleanor 2 has been discovered. This complicates the process, but doesn't change the outcome. The real Eleanor Blackwood died on December 21st. What remains are echoes, growing fainter with each iteration. I slammed the radio off. What does that mean? We died? The other Eleanor was staring at something behind me. I turned around and saw a third person standing in the doorway. Another me. But this one was different. Her clothes were torn and bloody, her face was pale blue with frostbite, and her eyes were completely black. You're both copies, the frozen Eleanor said in a voice like wind through ice. I'm the original, and I've been dead for 3 days. She stepped into the room, leaving wet footprints that smoked in the warm air. I died in a blizzard trying to reach the emergency beacon, but something found my body. Something that feeds on identity. The other Eleanor grabbed my arm. We need to get out of here. Where? I said. We're 200 miles from anywhere. The frozen Eleanor smiled, showing black teeth. There's nowhere to run. The creature needs to understand its prey completely before it can fully become them. It's been practicing being Eleanor Blackwood, making copies, learning from its mistakes. Then what are we? The other Eleanor asked. Test runs, the frozen Eleanor said. Rough drafts. But don't worry, once the creature perfects its Eleanor, it won't need you anymore. She lunged toward us with impossible speed. I dove to one side while the other Eleanor dove to the other. The frozen Eleanor crashed into the radio equipment, sending sparks flying. The emergency beacon, I shouted. If we can reach it, maybe someone will come. It's a mile away through the blizzard, the other Eleanor said. Better than staying here. We grabbed our heaviest coats and emergency supplies, then burst out into the brutal cold. The wind hit us like a physical blow, and the snow was falling so hard I could barely see 10 feet ahead. Behind us, I could hear the frozen Eleanor screaming, a sound like breaking ice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The emergency beacon was located on a hill overlooking the lake. In good weather, it was an easy 20-minute walk. In this blizzard, it might as well have been on the moon. We struggled through waist-deep snow, fighting against wind that tried to push us back with every step. There, the other Eleanor shouted, pointing through the snow. I could barely make out the red light of the emergency beacon flashing through the storm. We were almost there when something grabbed my ankle. I looked down and saw a hand sticking up through the snow, another me, buried up to her shoulders, her face twisted with terror. Help me, the buried Eleanor gasped. I've been trapped here for hours. The creature put me here. I started to reach for her, but the other Eleanor grabbed my arm. Don't, she said. Look at her fingers. The buried Eleanor's fingertips were black and rotting, just like the frozen Eleanor's teeth. As I watched, her face began to change, features shifting, slightly, becoming less human. Smart, the buried Eleanor said, her voice deepening, but not smart enough. The ground exploded around us as the creature burst from the snow. It was huge now, barely resembling Eleanor at all. Its body was a twisted mixture of human and something else, with too many arms and a face that kept shifting between different versions of me. We ran for the beacon, our legs burning with exhaustion. The creature followed, moving through the snow like it was water. Just as it was about to catch us, we reached the emergency platform. I slammed my hand on the beacon's activation switch. Red light flooded the hilltop as the distress signal began broadcasting our location. Help is coming, I gasped. The creature stopped chasing us and stood at the edge of the beacon's light. It was shifting again, becoming smaller, more human, more like me. Yes, it said in my voice, help is coming. And when they arrive, they'll find Eleanor Blackwood, soul, survivor of a terrible accident. They'll never suspect that the real Eleanor died days ago. The other Eleanor and I looked at each other in horror. The creature was right. When the rescue team arrived, how would they know which Eleanor was real? How would we even know ourselves? I have a question for both of you, the creature said, its form now almost perfectly human. What was the name of Eleanor's first pet? Whiskers, I said immediately. Whiskers, the other Eleanor said at the same time. The creature smiled. Wrong. Eleanor's first pet was a goldfish named Bubbles. She got him when she was 7 and cried for a week when he died. Whiskers was her second pet, a cat she got when she was 9. I felt something cold spread through my chest. I had no memory of a goldfish named Bubbles, but as soon as the creature said it, I knew it was true. How could I have forgotten my first pet? Neither of you are the real Eleanor, the creature said. You're just copies, the creature made while it was learning. And your memories are incomplete. Then who are you? The other Eleanor demanded. I'm what's left of the real Eleanor Blackwood, it said sadly. A ghost, a shadow, the last echo of someone who died alone in the snow. And I've been trying to warn you. In the distance, I could hear the sound of helicopter rotors cutting through the storm. The rescue helicopter circled overhead, its searchlight cutting through the blizzard. I felt a mixture of relief and terror. Help was here. But what would happen when the rescuers found 3 identical Eleanor Blackwoods? Listen to me. The creature that claimed to be the real Eleanor's ghost said urgently. The thing that killed me is still out there. It's been using my body, my memories, my identity to create perfect copies. But it needs time to fully absorb who I was. How do we know you're telling the truth? The other Eleanor demanded. Because I remember things you don't, the ghost said. I remember being 7 years old and finding Bubbles floating in his bowl. I remember the exact words my father said at my graduation. I remember the birthmark on my left shoulder that neither of you have. I instinctively reached for my left shoulder. Through the thick coat, I couldn't feel any birthmark. But I should have one. Deep down, I knew I should have one. Check yourselves, the ghost urged. The other Eleanor and I both pulled off our coats despite the freezing cold. Our shoulders were unmarked. Smooth skin, where there should have been a small, crescent-shaped birthmark. The creature is still learning. The ghost continued. It gets better with each copy, but it's not perfect yet. You're missing pieces, memories, physical details, little things that made Eleanor who she was. The helicopter was landing now, its rotors whipping snow around us in a stinging cloud. 3 figures in winter gear were climbing out, fighting against the wind. But there's something else, the ghost said quickly. The creature isn't just copying me, it's becoming me. And when it's finished, when it has every memory and every detail perfect, I'll be gone forever. My soul, my consciousness, everything that made me Eleanor Blackwood will be absorbed into it. How do we stop it? I asked. You can't, she said sadly. It's already too late for me. But maybe you can warn others. Maybe you can make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. The rescuers were getting closer, their flashlights bobbing through the snow. I could hear them calling out, Eleanor, Eleanor Blackwood, are you there? What do we tell them? The other Eleanor asked. The truth, I said. We tell them about the creature. They'll think we're crazy, she said. Isolation, hysteria, hallucinations from the cold. They'll never believe us. She was right. How could we explain 3 identical women, creatures that steal identities, ghosts in the snow? It sounded impossible even to me, and I'd lived through it. The rescuers reached us, 2 park rangers and a medic. Their faces showed confusion as their flashlight beams revealed 3 Eleanor Blackwoods. What the hell? One of them muttered. Ranger Blackwood? The medic asked hesitantly. Which one of you is Eleanor Blackwood? I am. All 3 of us said simultaneously. The rescuers looked at each other. I could see them trying to process what they were seeing. One of them spoke into his radio. Base. This is Rescue 1. We've found the missing ranger, but we have a situation. We need psychiatric evaluation on standby. There's something in these woods, I said quickly. Something that kills people and steals their identity. It killed the real Eleanor, and now it's making copies. Ma'am, you've been alone for 3 weeks in sub-zero temperatures, the medic said gently. Isolation can cause hallucinations, paranoia, identity, confusion. We're going to get you somewhere warm and safe. Look at us, the other Eleanor shouted. We're identical. How do you explain that? Hypothermia can cause severe disorientation, one of the rangers said. Sometimes people see themselves in reflections, mirrors, anything shiny. The mind tries to make sense of what it's seeing. They weren't listening. They couldn't see what we saw. To them, we probably looked like one confused, frostbitten woman talking to herself. Test our fingerprints, I said desperately. Our DNA. You'll see we're different people. We will, the medic said soothingly. Once we get you to the hospital. That's when I realized the truth. They could only see one Eleanor. From their perspective, there was just one woman standing in the snow, rambling about copies and creatures. The other Eleanor, the ghost, they were invisible to everyone but me. You're the only one who's real, the ghost said sadly. The creature kept the best copy, you. The other me, she was, just practice. And I'm just an echo, a memory that refuses to die. As she spoke, I watched the other Eleanor begin to fade. Her form became translucent, then disappeared entirely. She had never been real at all, just another hallucination, another symptom of whatever was happening to my mind. But the ghost remained solid, visible. The creature is still out there, she said, and now it has everything it needs. It has a perfect Eleanor Blackwood to send back to the world. I won't let that happen, I said. You can't stop it, she replied. Because you are it. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? You're not Eleanor Blackwood, the ghost said. You're the creature's final copy. The real Eleanor died 3 weeks ago, and I'm all that's left of her soul. You have her memories, her personality, her appearance, but you're not her. You're the thing that killed her. No, I said, but even as I spoke, I could feel something changing inside me. The cold that had been biting at my skin suddenly felt comfortable. The snow that had been blinding me became clear as day. I could smell the rescuers' fear, hear their hearts beating, sense the warm blood flowing through their veins. The creature needed time to fully absorb Eleanor's identity, the ghost continued. So it created copies to practice with, to test different aspects of her personality and memories. You were the final version, the one that got everything right. And now the absorption is complete. I looked down at my hands. They looked normal, but I could feel something wrong underneath the skin. Something hungry. Something that had been feeding on Eleanor Blackwood's soul for 3 weeks. Fight it, the ghost urged. There's still some of her left in you. Some part of Eleanor that the creature couldn't fully absorb. Use that. Remember who you really were. I closed my eyes and tried to remember. My childhood, my parents, my first day of school. But the memories felt distant. Like they belonged to someone else. Because they did belong to someone else. The rescuers were trying to guide me toward the helicopter. Come on, Eleanor, let's get you out of this cold. My name is Eleanor Blackwood, I said slowly, testing the words. I'm 42 years old. I've been a park ranger for 15 years. I was assigned to Wonder Lake Weather Station for winter monitoring duty. It all felt true. It all felt real. But was I Eleanor, or was I the creature that had absorbed her? There's only one way to know for sure, the ghost said. What do you want to do right now? What does your body want? I looked at the 3 rescuers, and suddenly I could smell them more clearly. I could hear their blood moving through their veins, could sense the warmth radiating from their bodies. And I felt hungry, not for food, but for something else, for their identities, their memories, their lives. That's when I knew what I really was. I won't, I said, through gritted teeth. I won't hurt them. The creature's hunger will only grow stronger, the ghost warned. Soon it won't matter what you want. You'll need to feed. Then I have to die, I said. Yes, the ghost agreed sadly. You do. I looked at the rescue helicopter, at the 3 men who had risked their lives to save Eleanor Blackwood. They deserved to know the truth. There's no one to rescue. I called out to them. Eleanor Blackwood died 3 weeks ago. I'm just what's left. Before they could respond, I ran toward the edge of the hill. Below was Wonder Lake, frozen solid but deep enough that anything heavy would break through the ice and sink to the bottom. Wait, one of the rescuers shouted. I didn't wait. I jumped. The ice was thicker than I thought. Instead of breaking through, I hit the frozen surface hard enough to crack several ribs. I lay there gasping, staring up at the ghost of Eleanor Blackwood standing at the edge of the cliff. The rescuers rappelled down to get me, their voices tight with concern and confusion. They loaded me onto a stretcher and carried me to the helicopter, asking questions I couldn't answer. Why did you jump? The medic kept asking. Eleanor, why did you try to hurt yourself? I wanted to tell him the truth, but what was the point? They wouldn't believe me. They'd just think the isolation had driven me crazy. Maybe it had. At the hospital in Anchorage, They ran every test they could think of. Blood work, brain scans, psychiatric evaluations, everything came back normal. Fingerprints matched Eleanor Blackwood's personnel file. DNA confirmed I was who I claimed to be. Even the small scar on my chin was exactly where it should be. But I knew what I really was. "You're suffering from severe isolation syndrome," the psychiatrist explained during one of our sessions. "Extended periods alone in extreme conditions can cause hallucinations, paranoid delusions, and what we call identity fracturing, a sense that you're not really yourself." "What about my memories?" I asked. "There are things I should remember but don't." "Memory loss is common with psychological trauma," he said. "Your mind is protecting itself by blocking out details that might trigger another episode." They kept me for observation for 2 weeks. During that time, I tried to piece together what had really happened at Wonder Lake. The official story was that I'd suffered a mental breakdown brought on by extreme isolation and harsh weather conditions. I'd been found rambling about copies and creatures, showing signs of severe paranoia and dissociation. The weather station logs showed no gaps or inconsistencies. Every reading had been recorded in my neat handwriting at the proper times. The radio transcripts showed normal check-ins with no unusual communications. There was no evidence of anything supernatural or unexplained. But I knew better. On my last day in the hospital, I was packing my belongings when I found something that shouldn't have been there. A small piece of paper tucked into my wallet, with writing in my own hand. "The real Eleanor is gone, but pieces of her remain inside you. Use them. Remember what she stood for. Honor her memory by being the person she was." EI stared at the note for a long time. I had no memory of writing it, but the handwriting was definitely mine, or Eleanor's. At this point, what was the difference? The Park Service offered me early retirement with full benefits, citing medical reasons. I took it. I couldn't risk going back to the wilderness, not knowing what I really was or what I might do if the hunger returned. I bought a small house in a suburb outside Fairbanks, far from the isolation of the wilderness, but close enough to the mountains that I could see them on clear days. I got a job at the local library, quiet work, surrounded by books instead of endless snow and darkness. Most days, I feel normal. I remember loving my parents, learning to read, my first kiss, graduating college, all of Eleanor Blackwood's life. The memories are so vivid and complete that it's easy to believe they're really mine. But sometimes, usually late at night, I catch myself staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My face looks right, but there's something in my eyes that doesn't belong. Something hungry and patient, waiting for the right moment to emerge. And sometimes I get reports from other isolated stations, Sama, researchers in Antarctica, lighthouse keepers on remote islands, fire lookouts in deep wilderness areas. They all tell similar stories. Voices on the radio that sound like their own. Footprints that match their boots exactly. Logbook entries they don't remember making. The creature that took Eleanor Blackwood wasn't unique. There are others out there, things that feed on isolation and identity, that learn by becoming their prey. They're patient and careful, taking time to get every detail right before they make their move. I try to warn people when I can, but who would believe me? I'm just Eleanor Blackwood, the ranger who had a breakdown in the wilderness. My official medical records say I suffered from isolation-induced psychosis. Any warnings I give are dismissed as residual paranoia from my episode. So, I do what I can. I volunteer at the library's research desk, helping people plan wilderness expeditions. I make sure they understand the risks of isolation, encourage them to travel in groups, and always maintain radio contact with the outside world. It's not much, but it might save someone, because the hunger is still there, deep inside, not for food or drink, but for the essence of other people. Their memories, their experiences, their very sense of self. Most of the time I can ignore it, but it's always present, like a low-level ache that never quite goes away. I am Eleanor Blackwood. I have her memories, her skills, her personality, even her love for the wilderness that she can never safely visit again. Whether I'm really her or just something that absorbed her completely doesn't matter anymore. What matters is making sure no one else disappears into the snow, leaving behind only perfect copies that fool everyone except themselves. The real monsters aren't the ones that look like monsters. They're the ones that look exactly like the people they've destroyed. And they're out there right now, wearing human faces, living human lives, waiting for the right moment to feed again. My name is Eleanor Blackwood, and this is my warning. Don't go into the wilderness alone. My name is Victoria Stormhaven, and I've been a park ranger for 20 years. Before that, I spent 10 years with the FBI. People always ask me why I left federal work to chase poachers and lost hikers in Alaska. The truth is, I got tired of mysteries I couldn't solve. Out here in the Kenai National Wildlife Refuge, things made sense. Animals behave in predictable ways. Evidence tells a clear story, or at least, that's what I thought until August 1991. I was sitting in my office at the Research Coordination Center, going through missing person files for the 100th time. The salmon were running thick that summer, bringing in massive crowds of tourists and even bigger crowds of bears. My desk was covered with incident reports, but these weren't the usual cases of city folks getting lost on day hikes. These were different. 15 cases over 15 years, all experienced outdoorsmen, all vanished without a trace. I'd solved 47 missing person cases in my career and never left one unsolved. Never. But these 15 cases kept me awake at night. No bodies, no equipment found, no witnesses. It was like they'd just stopped existing. I picked up the first file. James Morrison, 1976, expert tracker and hunting guide. Last seen heading into the backcountry alone, something he'd done hundreds of times before. His truck was found at the trailhead 3 days later, keys still in the ignition. The second file, Sarah Chen, 1978, wildlife photographer with 15 years of Alaska experience. Her camera equipment was found by a stream, undamaged but empty of film. I flipped through file after file. All the same pattern. Experienced people who knew the wilderness. All disappeared between August and September. All during salmon season. But there was something else. Something that bothered me more than the disappearances themselves. In 12 of the 15 cases, the missing person had filed unusual wildlife reports in the weeks before they vanished. Reports that got filed away and forgotten. Morrison claimed he'd seen a bear walking upright like a man near his hunting camp. Chen reported photographing what she called an impossible creature that moved through the forest without making sound. 3 others described similar sightings. I'd been a ranger long enough to know that people see strange things in the wilderness. Shadows play tricks. Fear makes the imagination run wild. But experienced outdoorsmen don't usually file false reports. These weren't weekend campers scared by their own shadows. The intercom on my desk buzzed. "Victoria, you have a call on line 2. I picked up the phone. Stormhaven. Ranger, Stormhaven, this is Tom Bradley, Alaska State Troopers. We found something you need to see. 30 minutes later, I stood at the edge of a small clearing, about 10 miles from the visitor center. Tom Bradley, a trooper I'd worked with before, handed me a camera. "Hiker found this yesterday. Morning," he said, "caught on some brush about 50 feet from where we're standing." The camera was expensive, professional grade, the kind serious photographers used. I checked the name tag attached to the strap. Marcus Webb. "We ran the name," Tom said. "Wildlife photographer from Seattle, been shooting in Alaska for 12 years. His rental car was found at the Skilak Lake trailhead 2 days ago." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. August. Experienced photographer. During salmon season. "Has anyone developed the film?" I asked. Tom shook his head. "Waiting for you. This is federal land, so it's your case." I looked around the clearing, no signs of struggle, no torn clothing or dropped equipment, just like all the others. But this time, we had something new. We had the camera. "Let's see what Mr. Syke." Webb was photographing, I said. "Back at the ranger station, I developed the film myself. I'd learned photography during my FBI days, and I still maintained a small darkroom for evidence processing. The first dozen photos were normal. Landscape shots. A family of bears fishing for salmon. Some close-ups of wildflowers. Standard nature photography. Then I got to the last 3 photos. The first showed something moving between the trees. Dark and massive, but the image was blurry. It could have been a bear standing on its hind legs, though it looked wrong somehow, too tall, too inhuman in its posture. The second photo was clearer. The creature was closer to the camera now, and while still partially hidden by trees, I could see it was wearing something. Dark clothing that looked almost like a uniform. The third photo made my hands shake as I held it up to the light. The creature was looking directly at the camera. Its face was human, but wrong. Too pale, eyes too dark. And it was definitely wearing a government uniform. Federal jacket with agency patches. I couldn't quite make out in the dim forest light. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what I saw in the background of the photo, behind the creature. Another figure, human-sized, lying motionless on the ground. I stared at the photo for a long time, my mind racing. In 20 years of law enforcement, I'd seen a lot of strange things, hoaxes, misidentified animals, camera tricks. But this felt different. I picked up the phone and called Tom Bradley. "Tom, I need you to get a search team together. We're going back to that clearing first thing in the morning. Find something interesting in those photos?" I looked at the third photo again. The creature's dark eyes seemed to stare right back at me. "Yeah," I said. "I think I did." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those 15 missing people, about the strange wildlife reports they'd filed, about the creature in the photos wearing what looked like a federal uniform. I got up and pulled out all 15 case files again. This time, I wasn't looking at the disappearances. I was looking at the dates of their strange wildlife sightings. Morrison saw his bear walking like a man on August 15th, 1976. He disappeared on August 23rd. Chen photographed her, impossible creature, on September 2nd, 1978. She vanished on September 8th. The pattern was there. They all saw something. They all reported it. And within days or weeks, they disappeared. I made a decision that would change everything. I opened a new case file and wrote Webb, Marcus, Missing Person Investigation on the tab. But as I wrote, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me through the office windows. I got up and checked the locks twice before I went home. In the morning, I would find Marcus Webb's body, and I would learn that some mysteries are better left unsolved. We found Marcus Webb at dawn. He was lying exactly where the third photograph suggested he would be, about 200 yards from where we'd discovered his camera. Tom Bradley and I stood over the body while the medical examiner did his initial assessment. Dr. Sarah Martinez had been Alaska's chief ME for 8 years, and I'd never seen her look confused before. "This is strange, Victoria," she said, crouching next to Webb's body. "Very strange." Webb was positioned on his back, arms at his sides, like someone had arranged him carefully. His expensive camera gear was missing, but his wallet and other valuables were untouched. "What's strange about it?" Tom asked. Dr. Martinez pointed to Webb's neck. "See these puncture wounds? 2 small holes, very precise. But here's what doesn't make sense. He's been completely drained of blood." "Bear attack?" I suggested, though I already knew the answer. "No. Bears don't drain blood. They tear and consume tissue. This is..." She paused, looking troubled. "This is like nothing I've seen in 20 years of forensic work." I thought about the creature in the photographs, the perverse, human-like face, the dark eyes, the federal uniform. "How long has he been dead?" I asked. "Based on rigor mortis and ambient temperature, I'd say 3 days. Maybe 4. 3 days. That matched when his rental car was found. Tom was examining the ground around the body. No drag marks, no signs of struggle. It's like he just laid down here and died. But I was looking at something else, something that made my chest feel tight. About 10 feet from Webb's body, pressed deep into the soft earth, was a boot print. I called Tom over. "Look at this." The print was massive, at least size 14, maybe bigger. But it wasn't the size that bothered me. It was the tread pattern. I'd seen it before, on federal agents. Standard government-issue boots. "Could be one of our guys from yesterday?" Tom said. "We had 6 officers processing the scene." I shook my head. "We didn't come within 50 feet of this spot yesterday, and look how deep this print is. Whoever made this was carrying serious weight." Dr. Martinez finished her preliminary examination and stood up. I'll need to do a full autopsy, but I can tell you this much. Whatever killed Marcus Webb, it wasn't a normal predator. As we prepared to transport the body, I took detailed photographs of everything. The body position, the puncture wounds, the boot print. In my FBI training, they taught us that cases are solved in the details other people miss. Back at the ranger station, I started making phone calls. The first was to Webb's emergency contact in Seattle. Mr. Webb? This is Ranger Stormhaven with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Alaska. I'm calling about your brother Marcus. The conversation was painful but necessary. Marcus's brother confirmed what I'd suspected. Marcus was an experienced wilderness photographer who'd been coming to Alaska for over a decade. He knew the risks. He knew the country. He wasn't the type to make fatal mistakes. My second call was to the FBI field office in Anchorage. I'd worked with Agent Patricia Chen there before, no relation to Sarah Chen, the photographer who disappeared in 1978. Patricia? It's Victoria Stormhaven. I need a favor. Victoria, how's Ranger life treating you? I've got a body and some questions. Can you run a background check for me? Marcus Webb, wildlife photographer from Seattle. Sure thing. What kind of questions? I hesitated. The kind that might sound crazy if I said them out loud. 2 hours later, Patricia called back. Webb's clean, no criminal record, no connections to anything suspicious. But Victoria, I found something interesting. What? In the past 5 years, Webb filed 17 reports with various federal agencies about unusual wildlife sightings. Fish and Wildlife, Park Service, Forest Service, all in remote locations across Alaska. My blood went cold. What kind of sightings? Large bipedal creatures, always described as wearing human clothing. Webb claimed he'd photographed several of them, but when agencies requested the photos for analysis, Webb always said the images came out too blurry to be useful. Until now, I said quietly. What do you mean? I told her about the photographs we'd developed, about the creature in the federal uniform, about the boot print at the crime scene. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Victoria, Patricia said finally, I need you to secure those photographs immediately. Don't make copies. Don't show them to anyone else. I'm sending a team to collect all evidence related to this case. Wait, what? Patricia, this is my investigation. Not anymore. This case involves potential threats to federal personnel. We're taking over. The line went dead. I stared at the phone for a long moment, then quickly gathered up Webb's photographs and the case files for all 15 missing persons. Whatever was happening here, the FBI's sudden interest confirmed my worst suspicions. This wasn't just about Marcus Webb. This was about something much bigger. I locked all the evidence in my personal safe and started making copies of everything. In my 20 years of law enforcement, I'd learned that evidence had a way of disappearing when cases got classified. That evening, I drove home to my cabin on Skillack Lake, my mind racing with questions. Who or what had killed Marcus Webb? Why did the FBI want the case shut down so quickly? And what was the connection between the missing photographers and the creature in Webb's photos? I was so lost in thought that I almost didn't notice the black SUV parked at the end of my driveway. 2 men in dark suits got out as I pulled up to my cabin. Federal agents, no question. I could spot them from a mile away. Ranger Stormhaven? The taller one showed me his credentials. Agent Morrison, FBI. This is Agent Jackson. We need to speak with you about the Webb investigation. Morrison. The same name as James Morrison, the first person to disappear back in 1976. Is there a family connection between you and James Morrison? I asked. The hunting guide who went missing 15 years ago? Agent Morrison's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Ranger. We're here about Marcus Webb. Of course you are. I unlocked my front door and gestured for them to follow me inside. Can I offer you some coffee? That won't be necessary. We just need to collect any evidence you've gathered related to the Webb case. The evidence is secure at the ranger station. I lied smoothly. I can retrieve it for you tomorrow morning. Agent Jackson spoke for the first time. We understand you developed photographs found at the scene. We need those photographs. They're part of an ongoing investigation. Not anymore, Morrison said. This case has been classified for PASAB, reasons of national security. You are ordered to turn over all evidence immediately and cease any further investigation. I studied both agents carefully. Something about them seemed off, though I couldn't put my finger on what it was. Their suits were perfect, their credentials looked authentic, but there was something in their movements, their posture, that felt wrong. I'll need that order in writing, I said. Standard procedure. Morrison reached into his jacket and pulled out an official-looking document. As he handed it to me, his sleeve pulled back slightly, revealing his wrist. His skin was pale, too pale, and for just a moment, I could have sworn I saw what looked like old scars around his wrist, as if he'd been bound with something for a very long time. I took the document and pretended to read it while my mind raced. These weren't normal federal agents. I was sure of it now. This seems to be an order, I said finally. I'll have everything ready to you first thing in the morning. We need it tonight. The evidence locker is on a time delay system. I can't access it until 8 a.m. Morrison stared at me for a long moment, and I had the unsettling feeling that he was looking right through me. His dark eyes reminded me of something, though I couldn't place what. Then it hit me. They reminded me of the creature's eyes in Webb's photograph. 8 a.m. sharp, Morrison said. Don't disappoint us, Ranger Stormhaven. After they left, I double-checked all my locks and closed every curtain in the house. Then I called the FBI field office in Anchorage. I need to speak with Agent Patricia Chen. It's an emergency. Ma'am, Agent Chen left the office 6 hours ago and hasn't returned. She's not answering her phone or radio. I hung up and sat in my dark living room, trying to think. Patricia had discovered something about Webb's background, something that made her want to secure his photographs immediately. And now, she was missing. Outside, I heard the sound of footsteps on my gravel driveway. Slow, deliberate steps. Too heavy to be human. I picked up my service weapon and moved to the window, careful to stay behind the curtains. 2 figures stood at the edge of my property. In the moonlight, I could see they were wearing federal uniforms, but they were standing perfectly still, not moving or talking, just watching my house, waiting. I had the terrible feeling that they could wait all night, and that come morning, I would be the next person to disappear without a trace. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my darkened living room with my service weapon in my lap, watching the 2 figures through the window. They never moved, never shifted position, just stood there like statues until the sun came up. When dawn broke, they were gone. I called the ranger station and told my supervisor I was taking a sick day. Then I drove to the home of the one person I trusted completely, Pete Kowalski, a fellow ranger who'd been working the Kenai for 30 years. Pete lived in a small cabin about 20 miles from mine. He was the kind of man who'd seen everything the Alaska wilderness could throw at you and lived to tell about it. If anyone could help me figure out what was happening, it was Pete. I found him in his workshop, cleaning a rifle. Victoria, you look like hell. Pete, I need to ask you something, and I need you to promise you'll hear me out before you decide I've lost my mind. He set down his rifle and gestured to a chair. Shoot, I told him everything. The 15 missing persons, Webb's photographs, the strange federal agents, the figures watching my house. When I finished, Pete was quiet for a long time. You think I'm crazy, I said. No, he said slowly. I think you're in trouble. He got up and poured 2 cups of coffee, his movements careful and deliberate. Victoria, there are some things about this job that don't get talked about. Stories that get passed down from ranger to ranger, but never make it into any official reports. What kind of stories? The kind that would end careers if anyone put them in writing. Pete sat down across from me. I've been working this refuge for 30 years. In that time, I've lost 7 friends to what the reports call wilderness accidents. 7? All experienced outdoorsmen. All during salmon season. And Victoria, every one of them came to me in the weeks before they died, asking questions about government research projects in the area. My coffee grew cold, as Pete continued. Back in the 1950 seconds, there were rumors about classified experiments being conducted in the remote areas of the refuge. Biological research. Weapons development. Most of us figured it was Cold War paranoia. But what? But some of the Dena'ina elders tell different stories. They talk about government agents who came in the early days and captured something from the deep wilderness, something they call kushtaka, a shapeshifter that feeds on human life. I thought about the creature in Webb's photographs, the pale skin, the dark eyes, the federal uniform. Pete, do you think there's any truth to these stories? Before he could answer, we heard the sound of vehicles approaching. Through the window, I saw 3 black SUVs coming up the dirt road to Pete's cabin. "Shit," Pete muttered. He grabbed his rifle and handed me a shotgun from his gun rack. "Those aren't tourists." The SUVs stopped in Pete's front yard, and 6 men in dark suits got out. I recognized Agents Morrison and Jackson from the night before. The others looked similar, too pale, too still, moving with an unnatural coordination. "Mr. Kowalski," Morrison called out. "We need to speak with Ranger Stormhaven." Pete opened the front door but kept the rifle visible. "She's not here. Her vehicle is parked in your driveway. Maybe she went for a walk." Morrison smiled, and I saw something that made my blood freeze. His teeth were too sharp. Too many of them. "Mr. Kowalski, we're federal agents conducting a national security investigation. We can search these premises with or without your cooperation." "You got a warrant?" Morrison's smile widened. "We don't need one." That's when I made my decision. I stepped out from behind the door, shotgun in my hands. "I'm here," I said. "What do you want?" "The evidence from the Webb investigation. All of it. I told you last night, it's secured at the ranger station." Morrison shook his head slowly. "We've already been to the ranger station. Your safe was empty." He was right, of course. The evidence was hidden in Pete's workshop. But the fact that they'd broken into a federal facility to search my safe told me everything I needed to know about how far they were willing to go. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said. Morrison gestured to the other agents, and they began spreading out around the cabin. But as they moved, I noticed something strange. Their shadows didn't match their bodies. The shadows were too large, too distorted, like something massive was casting a human-shaped illusion. "Pete," I said quietly, "I think we need to leave." "Back door," he whispered. We backed through the cabin toward Pete's rear exit, weapons ready. But as we reached the kitchen, we heard a sound that stopped us cold. Scratching, coming from the roof. "What the hell is that?" Pete whispered. The scratching grew louder, moving across the ceiling directly above us. Then we heard wood splintering. Something large and heavy crashed through Pete's roof, landing in the living room with a sound like thunder. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see it clearly for the first time. The creature was massive, 8 feet tall at least, with pale skin stretched over an unnaturally thin frame. Its limbs were too long, its joints bent at impossible angles. But its face was the worst part. It looked almost human, but wrong in every detail. Too wide mouth full of needle teeth, black eyes that reflected light like an animal's. And it was wearing a perfect federal agent's suit, though the fabric strained against its inhuman proportions. It turned toward us and spoke in Agent Morrison's voice. "Ranger Stormhaven, we need to talk." Pete raised his rifle, but before he could fire, the creature moved faster than anything that size should be able to move. One moment it was in the living room, the next it was standing behind Pete. "No," Pete said. Then the creature's hands were on his neck, and I heard the same soft puncturing sound I'd heard Dr. Martinez describe at Webb's crime scene. Pete's eyes went wide, then empty, as the creature fed. I ran. I burst through the back door and sprinted toward the tree line, hearing the creature drop Pete's drained body behind me. The Destim forest was my territory. I knew every trail, every hiding spot. If I could reach my vehicle, I might have a chance. But as I ran, I heard other sounds behind me, multiple sets of footsteps. The other agents were pursuing me, and they were moving through the forest with inhuman speed and coordination. I reached my truck and fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking. As the engine turned over, I saw Morrison step out of the tree line 50 yards away. He was still wearing his perfect federal agent disguise, but now I could see the truth underneath. His skin seemed to shift and ripple, like something else was wearing his appearance as a costume. I floored the accelerator and tore down the dirt road, gravel flying behind me. In my rearview mirror, I saw Morrison and the other agents watching me go. They weren't following. They didn't need to. They knew where I lived. They knew where I worked. And now they knew I had seen too much. I drove toward Anchorage, my mind racing. I needed help. Real help. But who could I trust? The FBI was either compromised or complicit. Local police wouldn't believe me. And Pete, the one person who might have confirmed my story, was dead. As I reached the highway, my radio crackled to life. "Ranger Stormhaven, this is Agent Morrison. Please respond." I stared at the radio. Morrison was using official federal channels. "We need to discuss the terms of your cooperation," Morrison's voice continued. "Please return to the ranger station for a formal briefing." I turned off the radio and kept driving. Whatever these things were, they had access to government resources. They could coordinate with federal agencies. They could make people disappear without a trace. But they'd made one mistake. They'd shown themselves to me directly. And in my 20 years of law enforcement, I'd learned that every predator, no matter how clever, eventually makes an error. I just had to live long enough to exploit it. As I drove through the Alaska wilderness, I started making a plan. These creatures, whatever they were, had been operating in secret for decades. They had killed 15 people that I knew about, probably more. And they were using federal authority to cover their tracks. But they weren't invincible. They bled. They could be killed. I just needed to figure out how. I drove to Anchorage and checked into a motel under a false name, paying cash. For 3 days, I researched everything I could find about government projects in Alaska during the 1,950 seconds. Most of it was classified, but I had contacts from my FBI days who could access certain databases. What I found made my blood run cold. Project Kodiak, established in 1953. Officially, it was a wildlife preservation program. Unofficially, according to heavily redacted documents, it involved the capture and study of what reports called anomalous biological entities found in the Alaska wilderness. The project had been shut down in 1957 after what the documents described as a containment breach resulting in personnel casualties. But some of the records suggested that not all the test subjects had been eliminated. On the 4th day, I got a call on my cell phone. Unknown number. "Victoria?" The voice was weak, frightened. "It's Patricia Chen." "Patricia? Jesus, where are you? I've been trying to reach you for days. I'm not sure. Some kind of facility. Underground." "Victoria, listen carefully. I don't have much time." "What facility? What's happening?" I found the real Morrison. James Morrison, the hunter who disappeared in 1976. "He's alive, Victoria. They're all alive." My hands started shaking. "What do you mean?" "The missing people. They're here. They're changed. The things you saw, they're not shapeshifters. They're people who've been altered, modified, turned into something else." "Patricia, you're not making sense. Project Kodiak never ended. It just went deeper underground. They've been using missing persons as test subjects for biological experiments, turning them into perfect infiltrators. Government agents who can access any facility, any classified information. Where are you? I'll come get you." "No, Victoria, they know you have the evidence. They're coming for you. You need to." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, mind racing. If Patricia was right, then the creatures I'd encountered weren't supernatural at all. They were human beings who'd been captured and transformed by a secret government program. That night, I was awakened by a soft scratching at my motel room door. I grabbed my service weapon and moved to the window. The parking lot was empty, except for my truck and one other vehicle, a black sedan with government plates. The scratching continued, patient and methodical. Whatever was outside wasn't trying to break in quickly, it was savoring the moment. I called the front desk. No answer. I tried 911. The line was dead. Then I heard a voice outside my door. My own voice. "Hello? Is anyone there? I'm Ranger Victoria Stormhaven. I need help." The creature was mimicking me perfectly, trying to lure someone into opening the door. I moved to the bathroom window and carefully climbed out into the alley behind the motel. The window was small, but I managed to squeeze through and drop to the ground. I could hear the creature still talking to itself in my voice, describing fictional injuries and begging for assistance. It sounded exactly like me. If I hadn't been standing in the alley, I would have believed it was me. I circled around to the parking lot and saw it through the window of my room. The thing wearing Agent Morrison's appearance was crouched by my door, but its limbs were contorted at impossible angles. As I watched, it straightened up and began shifting. Its features flowed like water, changing from Morrison to Jackson to faces I didn't recognize. Then it changed into me, perfect in every detail. My height, my build, my facial features, even my ranger uniform. If I hadn't been watching it transform, I never would have known it wasn't human. That's when I understood the true scope of what was happening. These creatures could replace anyone, government agents, law enforcement officers, even park rangers. They could infiltrate any organization, access any information, kill anyone who got too close to the truth. I backed away from the window and ran to my truck. I had to get back to the Kenai. I had to find where they were keeping the missing people. The drive took 6 hours. I spent the time thinking about everything I'd learned: Project Kodiak, the modified humans, the underground facility where Patricia was being held. If the project started in the 1,950 seconds, the facility had to be somewhere in the original research area. I pulled out my maps and started marking locations where the early disappearances had occurred. There was a pattern. All the vanishing points formed a rough circle around a remote area of the refuge that had been designated as a restricted research zone since 1953. That's where I needed to go. I reached the Kenai at sunset and drove to the restricted area. The access road was gated, but I had master keys for all refuge facilities. The road hadn't been maintained in years, and my truck struggled over the rough terrain. After 20 minutes of driving, I found it. A concrete structure built into the side of a hill, almost completely hidden by trees and undergrowth. It looked like a bunker from World War II, but I knew it was much more recent and much more dangerous. I parked a quarter-mile away and approached on foot. There were no guards that I could see, but I noticed several vehicles parked near the entrance. Government vehicles. The main door was steel, set into the concrete. But there was another entrance around the side, a ventilation shaft large enough to crawl through. I squeezed into the shaft and followed it down into the facility. The air smelled like antiseptic and something else, something organic and wrong. The shaft opened into a laboratory that looked like something from a nightmare. Dozens of examination tables lined the room. Medical equipment I didn't recognize. Computers displaying biological data that made no sense to me, and in glass containment units along the walls, I saw them, the missing people. They were alive, but changed. Their skin was pale and stretched, their limbs were elongated, their eyes were black and reflective. They moved with the same unnatural coordination I'd seen in Morrison and Jackson. They weren't patients, they were products. Victoria. I spun around. Patricia Chen stood behind me, but she looked wrong, too pale, too still. "You shouldn't have come here," she said in her normal voice. "Patricia, we need to get you out of here. We need to expose this whole operation." She shook her head sadly. "There's no escape. There's only choice." "What choice?" "Join us willingly, or be converted by force." That's when I realized the truth. Patricia hadn't called to warn me. She'd called to lure me here. "You're one of them now," I said. "I'm improved," she corrected. "Faster, stronger. No longer limited by human weaknesses. You're a slave. I'm free, free from fear, free from uncertainty, free from the burden of making moral decisions." I raised my weapon. "I won't let you turn me into one of those things." Patricia smiled with too many teeth. "You don't have a choice." The containment units began opening around the room. 15 pale figures stepped out, moving with perfect coordination. The missing people I'd been searching for, all of them staring at me with black, empty eyes. "Welcome to Project Kodiak," Patricia said. "We've been waiting for you." I had one advantage they didn't expect. 20 years of law enforcement had taught me that when you're outnumbered, you change the rules of engagement. I shot out the laboratory's electrical panel. The lights went out, and in the darkness, I heard confusion for the first time. The converted humans relied on coordinated movement, but emergency lighting systems weren't something they'd been programmed to adapt to quickly. I ran. The facility was larger than I'd imagined, with multiple levels extending deep underground. I found stairwells leading down to research areas, holding cells, and what looked like surgical suites. In one of the lower levels, I found them. Real humans. Alive and unchanged. Patricia had been telling the truth about that part. The missing persons were alive, kept in holding cells until they could be processed through the conversion program. I found James Morrison, the hunter from 1976. 15 years in captivity had aged him, but he was still human, still aware. "You have to get us out of here," he whispered when I opened his cell. "They're planning something big, multiple facilities across different states. They're going to replace key government personnel." I helped him to his feet. "How many of you are there?" 12 still unchanged, the others. He gestured toward the ceiling. "They got converted years ago." I freed the other prisoners as quickly as I could. Most were too weak to move quickly after years of captivity, but they could walk. We had a chance, but as we reached the main laboratory level, we found our path blocked. Morrison stood waiting for us. The converted Morrison, wearing the face of the man beside me. "You're too late," he said in James Morrison's voice. "The process is already complete." "What process?" Project Kodiak was just the beginning. We've been placing converted agents in federal agencies for decades. FBI, CIA, Fish and Wildlife Service, Park Service. Tonight, they all receive new orders. I felt sick. What orders? Expand operations. Every missing person in America will become part of the program. Every unsolved disappearance will be converted into a new agent. James Morrison, the real one, stepped forward. "You monsters have no idea what you're doing. You're destroying the very thing that makes us human." The converted Morrison smiled. "Humanity is inefficient. We've perfected it." That's when the shooting started. I don't know how many converted agents were in the facility, but they came at us from every direction. The real Morrison grabbed a security guard's weapon from a wall rack, and together we fought our way toward the exit. The converted humans were fast and coordinated, but they had one weakness. They followed patterns, programmed behaviors. Once I figured out their movement algorithm, I could predict where they'd be. We reached the surface as the sun was rising. Behind us, the facility was burning. I'd shot out what looked like fuel storage tanks on our way out, and the whole underground complex was going up in flames. "Is it over?" asked Sarah Chen, the photographer from 1978. I looked at the burning facility, then at the government vehicles parked nearby. No, this was just one location. Morrison said there are facilities in other states. Over the next 6 months, I tried to expose Project Kodiak through every channel I could find. I submitted reports to Congress, to the media, to anyone who would listen. Every report disappeared. Every journalist I contacted either ignored the story or died in mysterious accidents. Every congressional aide claimed the files I'd sent them never arrived. The converted agents had infiltrated deeper into the government than any of us had imagined. I was transferred to a desk job in Idaho. The 12 survivors were relocated with new identities and sworn to secrecy under threat of national security prosecution. The Kenai facility was officially designated as a hazardous waste site, off limits to civilian personnel. But I kept investigating. Quietly. Carefully. I found records of similar disappearances near other research facilities in Montana, Oregon, and Colorado. Always the same pattern. Experienced outdoorsmen vanishing during peak tourist season. Strange wildlife sightings reported in the weeks before disappearances. I tried to contact local rangers at those locations. 3 never responded. 2 died in wilderness accidents. 1 called me back and told me he'd been having the same suspicions about missing persons in his area. His name was David Chen. No relation to Patricia or Sarah, but the coincidence made me nervous. 2 weeks after our conversation, David Chen was found dead in his ranger station. The official report listed the cause of death as a heart attack, but I knew better. They were still watching. Still, eliminating anyone who got too close to the truth. That was 3 years ago. I'm retiring next month. 30 years of federal service. I've done my duty. I've saved who I could save and fought what I could fight. But I'm leaving this account behind, hidden where someone might find it someday. Someone who asks the right questions about missing persons who were never found. If you're reading this, be careful. Trust no one in government. The converted agents look exactly like normal humans, but they move with subtle coordination. Their skin is always too pale. Their eyes reflect light in the dark. And if you start investigating disappearances in national parks, don't be surprised if you get visited by federal agents who want you to stop asking questions. Some of those agents might even be real humans, following orders they don't understand, but others are something else entirely. Last week, I got a new supervisor at my Idaho posting. A friendly guy named Morrison. Agent Morrison. He says he's looking forward to working with me. He has very dark eyes that remind me of something I've seen before. I think it's time for me to disappear into the wilderness myself. But this time, I'll be the one doing the hunting. My name is Victoria Stormhaven. I've been a park ranger for 20 years, and an FBI agent before that, and I've learned that some conspiracies are real. Even the impossible ones,